Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to be sitting down with Dr. Amanda Alexander today as part of the Ron Brown Scholar Program's 25th anniversary, not only because of her transformative work in our home state of Michigan, but also because she was my roommate during our Ron Brown Scholar Selection Weekend way back in 2000. So I tend to take a particular pride in all the good work she's doing in the world, whether that is warranted on my part or not. Very briefly, as background, Amanda holds an undergraduate degree from Harvard, a PhD in international history from Columbia, and a law degree from Yale. All safety schools, basically, just to sum it up. Amanda is currently the founding executive director of the Detroit Justice Center in Detroit, Michigan. And Amanda, I would love to get this started by asking you to tell us, what is the Detroit Justice Center exactly?
Sure. Well, first of all, it is a total joy to be in conversation with you, Angela. There is no one I'd rather be having this conversation with. We have been with each other on our Ron Brown journey, as you said, since day one, and I am really excited too to be here as part of celebrating the program's 25th anniversary, which is an incredible milestone. So to get into the conversation, so the Detroit Justice Center, we're a nonprofit legal organization focused on ending mass incarceration and building equitable and just cities. And we opened our doors 3.5 years ago. And I really founded it on the belief that we cannot build cities that work for everyone without addressing the impacts of mass incarceration. And so what we do in practice is something that we call defense, offense, and dreaming under one roof, because we need all three. And so the defensive prong is our legal services and advocacy practice. And that's where we are providing direct legal services to people who need it. So people come to us with, a dozen different traffic-related warrants because they haven't been able to get a driver's license, and they are saddled with court debt, fines and fees. They aren't able to drive safely without the fear of being pulled over or jailed. They aren't able to get a job. And so we resolve those barriers and help them to stay out of jail and prison and find affordable housing, to be able to get a job to support their families. And then we go on offense with our economic equity practice. And so that's where we have 2 transactional attorneys who are supporting communities in creating community land trusts, worker-owned cooperatives. This is really the part where I say that we are shoring up our clients' freedom dreams for their neighborhoods. So for example, we had a client who came to us. It was an organization that had bought up 14 homes around their community center, and they had a vision for the neighborhood. And they said, we want to turn one of these houses into transitional housing for men coming back from prison. We want to keep the neighborhood affordable for generations to come. So maybe that's a community land trust. We want to start a small business corridor of cooperatively owned businesses. Oh yeah, we want to put community solar over the whole thing. And it was just this beautiful puzzle that combined the solution for neighborhood affordability, reentry housing, climate justice. And it was our role as attorneys to figure out how to make that happen. And so that is our offense prong, is really shoring up these, visions for community development. And then our Just Cities Lab is where we dream and where we invite others to dream with us about the elements of a just city that would make policing and prisons obsolete. So in the past year, we've launched the Metro Detroit Restorative Justice Network. So we are helping people to get trained up in how to resolve conflicts and prevent harm through restorative justice processes, rather than relying on prosecution and courts and incarceration. And we also do quite a bit of policy-related work. So we've been, part of the fight to expand clean slate expungement access here in the state of Michigan, to end the practice of suspending people's driver's licenses when they can't pay court fines and fees, and ending cash bail, among other things. So that is what my incredible team is up to.
That is so awesome. I mean, I think a lot of us, have a sense of the waterfall of consequences that there can be from such a small infraction, like driving with a suspended license. But as lawyers, it's it sounds nice to me, not to only be thinking reactively and only working on the defensive side of things. So was part of your mission or intention for the center to really take a more holistic approach to helping the community that you're in?
Absolutely. So it grew out of a lot of things. I think I've been informed, fortunately, by a lot of mentors and a lot of organizers who have oriented me towards visionary organizing. So this idea that it's not enough to focus on what we're tearing down or the defensive fights. We also have to take time to, imagine what we're building up and what we're fighting for. But I would say concretely, one of the seeds was when I was in law school. And I remember the first year when I was at Yale, you have the option to enroll in a clinic in your second semester. And I was really torn. I had gone to law school wanting to work on mass incarceration. My father was incarcerated when I was in elementary school, and I knew that eventually I wanted to grow up and tear this system down. And I felt like going to law school, I was finally going to be able to work on that. And so I was torn between, do I sign up for the Prisoners' Rights Clinic, the Detention Human Rights Clinic, and represent people in solitary confinement in the state of Connecticut? Or do I enroll in the neighborhood development clinic that seemed to be doing amazing work that was getting at the roots of some issues? Because we know that underlying incarceration is so much structural violence in the form of lack of housing, wealth discrepancies, all of this. And so I felt really torn, and I felt like you shouldn't have to choose. Like, this is all liberation work. Whether you're doing the hard work of, public defenders to get individual clients, out of the system, or if you're doing the work of building up community visions. And so the idea of trying to combine it under one roof, was really exciting, because I didn't think that we should have to choose, how we show up for movements. And it's also important because they inform each other. I don't think that you can do just one side of the work completely and holistically without keeping the other in view.
Yeah, I love that. That is great. Is there do you have a favorite project? I don't know if, you think about them that way, but in terms of what the center has done so far, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, well, so many, so many highlights. One that I think about often, though, in our very first months that we were opening, we were asked by activists to try to stop a new jail from being built in the city of Detroit. So when I tell people that Wayne County was, now is spending $500 million on building a new jail, people think that I'm, they think it's absurd, in terms of all the things that Detroit and Wayne County could be spending money on. They're saying like, but isn't there an issue with the water pipes in your schools? Isn't there black mold in your schools? What about your transit system, that's non-existent practically? And so, activists have been fighting this potential new jail construction for a long time. And when we opened our doors, they asked us to, file a federal lawsuit in order to stop it from moving forward. And so we ended up doing that. But as part of that work, we were also holding a lot of community conversations about how would people want this $533 million to be spent in their community. And so one of the favorite things that we've done so far is we held a youth design summit. And this was with young people in the city who were already engaged around organizing around the school to prison pipeline. There were some of the most kick-ass youth organizers in the city. And so, these were like 13 to 18-year-olds, and we brought them together for a day with the architecture and design firm Designing Justice's Designing Spaces. And we held a workshop, and we asked them, if we were going to spend this money in a way that would make you feel safe and valued and empowered, what would you build? And they actually, created renderings. And some of the things that they came up with, one girl said, I would build a mental health spa. Right? We're all like, what is that? Can we have that now? And she had such a clear vision of what she knew that she needed. She said, on the first floor, you can have a space for individual therapy to just talk through whatever's making you anxious, whatever's on your heart. And on the second floor, you can have a group, mediation. centers and group therapy. So maybe talking through something with a loved one. And then up on the roof, you could just look out at the view of the Detroit River and have that feel serene. And she and the other young people had designed it down to what would be the most soothing paint colors on the walls. And I'm, for the cost of this jail, we could build mental health spas on every corner. And what would that do in terms of, avoiding conflict, reducing the potential for harm. And that was just one of the many ideas. They said, we want transit that will get us from one side of the city to the other. We want our teachers to be well paid. We want the water pipes in our schools to be fixed. One boy said, I want a place where you can go, and if you need money, like you really need it, you can get it without filling out a lot of paperwork. And it's, he said, if my neighbors' needs are met, and they're doing okay, then I think that my family and I will be okay. So just the ways that young people are not trained yet to think of people as disposable, and to think beyond themselves and to think about what their community needs. That to me was one of the most powerful things that we have done so far. And it really rippled. So it got some news coverage, and we heard from people from Seattle to DC saying, look at Detroit young people showing us a future beyond jails and prisons.
Yes, that is amazing that they can, really see what could be in their own neighborhoods, in their own community. Yeah. What a great idea. Mm-hmm. So one of your most recent projects is a podcast with the Detroit Justice Center. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So it is called Freedom Dreams. And the idea is that we believe another world is possible, and we are talking to the people who are building it. So, like I've said, it's been a real part of our mission and our guiding philosophy at DJC that we can't just focus on what we're tearing down. We have to focus on what are our dreams for what we could build together. And so each episode is interviewing people locally in Detroit, but across the country as well, who are building a better world right now. So for the first episode, we talked, it was called, How Could You Shut Down Your City Jail? And we talked to two of the most incredible organizers I have ever met, based in Atlanta. And they have led a campaign over the course of many years to reduce their local jail population from over 1,000 to just a couple dozen. And they walk us through how they did that, how they reduced the population. And then what occurred to them, they said, okay, we've been spending $32 million on caging people. What should we build instead? And so they ended up coming with this idea of a Center for Wellness, Equity, and Freedom. And so we hear that story as well, which I think is powerful because there are campaigns in cities across the country to close jails or block new jail construction. But what they're doing in Atlanta is thinking about, okay, once we shut it down, how do we make sure that it won't just be reopened as an immigration detention center? Right. And this place won't just be used for more human misery. What do we need in our community, and how could we repurpose this space for that? So we're talking with people who are building community land trusts, who are really pushing forward the work of place-based education. It's just who are doing restorative justice work. So basically people who deserve such a spotlight for the ways that they are building up the world that we need.
Yeah, totally. And do you have a sense that these sorts of projects and these sorts of initiatives are happening all over the country?
Yes. And that's, I think we've started with this circle of people who are, known to us, who are known to me and to Detroit Justice Center, who are kind of in our orbit. But that's the thing. I mean, there are people that are doing visionary organizing along these lines in cities and towns across the country. And I think when we think about what, media narratives tend to focus on, they tend to focus on the problems. Yes, we need to focus on all of that. We need to focus on terrible legislation that is moving through Congress. We need to focus on all of that, but we don't give nearly enough attention to the people who are, building up and who are creating. One of the episodes that we're about to air is around participatory budgeting and the defund police movement. And what was important to me there was, while pundits have been debating for the past year and a half, is defund the police the right slogan? Is it counterproductive? Is it costing Democrats the elections? All of this, while they were debating, people were building. And so locally, people were shifting. In the first 10 months, they shifted $840 million out of police budgets. They were not concerned about the semantics. Is this the right slogan? They were just doing the hard work of supporting families impacted by police violence, looking at their city budgets and their police spending, showing up at city budget meetings to, make the case to shift it where it needs to go. So I think we just need to focus less on the semantics, less on what needs to be torn down, and more on the people who are showing us a better way.
I mean, that's what I'm interested in, not so much the theoretical, like how can we get something done? How can we make a dent in these problems that sometimes seem, too big to tackle?
Yeah. And that's the thing. They always seem too big until you hear about someone who's taken that little step, and understanding like, this massive problem. Well, when you break it down into smaller pieces and learn about what people in other places are doing, I think it can give us the courage to be bolder.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've listened to the first couple of episodes. It is fantastic. I think your voice, your communications director's voice, the voices of the community are all really striking. So I am looking forward to the coming episodes and however many seasons you end up having.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
How can people get involved with the Detroit Justice Center? People who are watching this interview or might otherwise hear about the center itself.
Yeah, so lots of ways. I think, particularly for people in the Ron Brown Scholar Network who might be interested in a legal path, it's been really important to me to build more kind of pathways and pipelines for young people who are interested in radical lawyering, lawyering that supports social movements. And so we have built a summer internship program where we work with other movement lawyering organizations across the country. So we partner, it's Detroit Justice Center, Community Justice Project in Miami, Law for Black Lives, Amistad Law Project in Pennsylvania, and a couple of others. And this is really a movement lawyering summer boot camp where they can get a taste of what is it like to do this type of work day to day. There's an opening and a closing retreat, for the law students across the country at different sites. And so that is one way. I would say for current law students, that is one way to plug into our work. But I would say, I think, for people who are, further afield, tune in to the podcast, spread the word about the podcast. And of course, if you are moved, donate to our work. And I know, Angela, you have so thank you for being one of our supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a worthy, not just cause, because there's so many causes wrapped up in it, but yes, I'm a very proud supporter of what the Detroit Justice Center is doing. And, the internship, and you're also teaching a course at Wayne State Law School, right? So this is fascinating to me because radical lawyering, I was not taught at the institution where I learned my legal education. So can you tell us a little bit about what your law school course focuses on?
Sure. And so I would say, really the past decade, part of my work working with many other folks across the country, particularly through Law for Black Lives, has been really, trying to move this field of movement lawyering forward. And it grew pretty organically. I was in law school from 2010 to 2013, and the same, movement lawyering was not a class that you could take the way that it is now, fortunately. I think, but many of us had come out of a background of community organizing and, working in social movements. And so it was really disorienting to come to law school and have questions of movements, organizing, power, justice not really be talked about in the ways that we knew, were accurate when you think about how change actually happens. And so the idea behind movement lawyering is really, it's a deep study of the way that social change has happened over time. And looking back, I mean, I think that the way that we typically are taught that change happens is that it is through landmark civil rights cases, that there are attorneys who sit at their desk and are reading the Constitution closely, are reading case law, and come up with some novel legal theory, and then need to go out and find the right plaintiff to test it out. And that change will come if you can get the Supreme Court to decide in your favor. And looking back at history, what we know is that sustainable social change so often has happened because people have taken collective action and built movements around it. I mean, if you look at the history of the Montgomery bus boycott, we're typically taught that Rosa Parks, refused to give up her seat, and somehow the buses were desegregated. But we don't learn as much about the 381-day boycott that people of Montgomery, led, the fact that they built an alternative transit system to get each other around the city, the role of cooks like Glenda Gilmore in fueling that movement for over a year. I mean, these are the types of stories of collective action that we need to be attuned to as lawyers. And if we are, then we understand that the law is an important tool among many other tools. And so our work as lawyers is to build up the power of organizers to lead their own struggles. And so to kind of take a back seat and do a lot more listening, but to listen hard for the places that where legal tools might be useful. And so part of our work, at Detroit Justice Center is, kind of practicing movement lawyering and trying to be nimble and responsive to the needs of activists who are in the streets. And then, as we've been saying, training up the next generation of people to be able to approach the legal profession in this way.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess I would like to talk to you also about how you got to this point. What was the path that led you here? Going back to college and your post-college experiences, how do you think those have informed, your eventual arrival at this point and founding the Detroit Justice Center?
Yeah, so I would say I, got to college and very quickly. So I went in thinking I was pre-med, and then, got pretty interested in what are the systemic inequities, the public health inequities that drive health outcomes. So I got very interested in what are the structural dynamics that lead to the outcomes that we see in terms of health. And so I was trained up my first year of college by longtime organizers with ACT UP New York and ACT UP Philadelphia. That's the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And these were people who had been organizing in the 80s and 90s to get AIDS drugs available to people who needed them. And they did this because they were tired of watching their loved ones die because drugs were not hitting the market fast enough. And so they taught me just about everything I know about how to, just how to make clear demands of those in power, how to force the hand of the people who can give you what you need. And so often that is through direct action and people power. And so I spent much of college organizing something called the Student Global AIDS Campaign that went on to become a national organization that was pushing for more AIDS funding for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And from there, I ended up going to South Africa for a couple of years after college and continued to learn from incredible organizers. So people there who had fought against apartheid. And, and yet we're saying this isn't the democracy that we fought for. We are not free because even though we can vote, the majority of folks here are not living, lives where they're flourishing. Land has not been redistributed. People are still living in shack settlements without running water. And so, they were the ones who really trained me in thinking about what must freedom mean. It's more than just civil rights or the right to vote. It's everything that it takes in order to make communities where people can thrive. And so from there, I'll fast forward a bit. I ended up going to grad school for history because I often felt that organizers were doing incredible work, but were putting out fires without a deeper sense of history. And so it felt important to me then to study the history of social movements, and then decided to go to law school. Because I was feeling like I was getting too alienated from some of the movement work that I wanted to be doing when I was surrounded by hundreds of books. And so, wanted to go to law school and see if there was a way for lawyers to be useful in making social change. And from there, ended up starting a women incarceration and family law project at Yale that was providing legal information to incarcerated parents to help them maintain their rights to their children. And that was the seed of the project that I would bring back home to Michigan. So I ran a project for a couple of years representing incarcerated parents in foster care proceedings. And helping families to stay together once the foster care system and prison system had collided on them. And at the same time, this is 2013, 2014, the movement for Black Lives is getting going. And so was doing a lot of volunteer work with other attorneys in the city to do protester defense and to raise money for bail funds and all of this. And it was really then that it was just becoming so clear that the ways that we were trained as lawyers were insufficient, and we needed ways to match the power and energy and vision of the activists in the streets. And so decided then, along with other folks in the city, that we needed an institution that could really hold the type of work that was being asked of us. So that's a version of the story of how I got here.
Yeah. And of course, last but not least, what role has our program, the Ron Brown Scholar Program, played in your work and your successes, do you think?
So it has been an incredible community to be part of for the last over 20 years now. And to be able to be connected to people who are all so different. I think that is part of the strength of this program, that it's not, churning out people who are all going down a certain path, like politics or business, or, there are certainly people who are doing that, but we also have people who are incredible playwrights, people who are incredible parents, godparents, aunts, uncles, people who are teachers, people who are, just showing up with such integrity and such commitment to service in whatever way they feel called to do. And so that has been incredibly powerful. And I remember, I think in my mid-20s or so, we were at an RBS conference and they put me on a panel called The Road Less Traveled, and I felt like, even though I wasn't, maybe you couldn't necessarily map me into certain, buckets, like I don't think I had decided to go to law school yet, but they included me, like there was a place, they're like, she's on to something, there isn't a bucket for it yet, but let's hear what she has to say. And so I think the fact that I have never, ever felt like they had a sense that there was a right path to go down. What I have, felt over the years is just profound support and love from this extended family. And that just to have a program and people who are so steadfastly in your corner is such a powerful thing as you move through life. So it's something I'm deeply grateful for, and to be connected to you all these years later.
I agree. I think the program does such a great job with exactly that, just remaining a steadfast, reliable, resource and network and community for us. And we do. I mean, we are so excited about the work that you're doing. All of us support you in all your efforts, and are proud to shout it from the rooftops, all the great work that you're doing. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that we should know about your work or what's next for you?
I don't think so. I think we covered quite a bit, Angela. Thank you. And I would just want to end on a note of deep, deep gratitude for the Ron Brown Scholar Program, the whole team, and everybody. And I just want all of us to keep shining in our own way. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I personally find your vision and the innovation and fearlessness you bring to your work to be really inspiring, and I know the rest of our program does too. So thank you for bringing hope and a roadmap to these societal issues that can all too often seem too daunting to overcome.
Thank you.